The Cabinet from Beyond the Stars, written by Moscow J. Styles. Seben stood outside on the balcony gazing at the cosmos above her. The glowing shimmers of light against the pitch dark of the cosmos was always a comfort to her. In a universe unfathomably dark and unsettling, those lights would always be there to shine for her. It was a feeling she needed desperately at the moment, for her father, though a patient sultan, was beginning to find the negotiations with the Akhenaten Empire were beginning to end, and for the first time in 90 years' peace, Kemetsheps would face war. Tensions had not always been this thick in Kemetsheps. In fact, there was a time when the desert land and Akhenaten lived in what could be described as harmony. But that was long ago, and with the ever-looming threat of war on the horizon, most citizens of the city of Uraeus chose to hope and pray that the gods might deliver them out of harm's way. For as Princess Seben knew, her homeland had no weapons to speak of. The people of Kemetsheps were always a peaceful people, and her father was quickly sobering up to the fact that they may need to find a way of defending themselves. And though Uraeus was accepting of the Sultan's son before she became his princess, cracks in civility were beginning to show, and because of it, the once social Seben no longer felt safe in public appearances as she once did as a man. So, she spent her days atop the tower of her father's wishes, in the hopes that the gods may provide a solution to their problems. Till one day, the sky flared up in a huge flash of light, shocking Seben out of her daze. She looked up to see one of the points of light rapidly descending to the ground, and then up, as if trying to climb the waterfall of space before it finally began to hurtle towards her tower. First slowly, paralyzingly, then rapidly, as this strange fireball from space crashed into the courtyard with a huge ferocious sound. But there was no fire or anything. Whatever this object was, it caused no destruction. She peered out at the courtyard to find some sort of strange shiny black box with a bizarre yet classical and anachronistic style to it. The steam from it declared a heat of immense temperature, and as the royal guards began to run out in numbers to see what the commotion was about, not to mention it had probably awoke the Sultan and Seben's mother, the defenders began to slowly make their way forward to find out just what this thing might be, when suddenly the center of it cracked open, and a most peculiar, wiry man came tumbling out. He looked more bemused than the sheer panic and confusion that was filling Seben and her people. He calmly stood up and brushed the dirt off his strange uniform, and despite the fearful spears being pointed at him, revealed some sort of item that fit in his hand, which he seemed to press on. Then Seben watched as the seconds passed, and like waves in an ocean, the guards dropped their spears and looked at him with the most empty eyes and expressions. Even her parents, who had only just made it out, fell victim to his charm. The princess watched him mumble something about going back, and suddenly, like shepherd herding his flock, everyone went back mechanically to the exact spots they had been moments before he had landed. The frightened girl hid, hoping he wouldn't spot her because whatever that wave was, it didn't seem to affect her so high up. She gazed at him fearfully as he composed himself. A strange, sickly-looking man with an unusual amount of energy for someone so sick and thin-looking. She noticed his bizarre clothes, which seemed to match the carvings on the box he fell out of. He was dressed rather smart and wore a cape and some sort of black top hat, strange white gloves, and carried a cane too. He stood out immensely against the regal design of her culture's garb. The man was white-skinned too, which indicated to the princess he might have been native to Akhenaten, but after seeing what he was capable of, that was probably unlikely. After all, he fell straight from the sky. Petrified Seben decided she needed to call on her father and maybe snap him out of whatever trance he had been put under, but as she summoned the courage to run down, she was unable to wake anybody she found asleep, and even more strange, barely seemed to arouse any suspicion that the guards were even conscious she was awake. It was as if the tower was hers alone. With every room on her descent, she kept vigilant on what this mysterious stranger was doing. What kind of malevolent schemes had he brought to plunder her home with? But she found he just spent his time at his own pace, pushing that strange black box till it was standing upright. Finally, she made it to the courtyard, hiding behind one of the corners. Adrenaline had brought her this far, but what could she even hope to accomplish against the strange magics of this bizarre man from beyond the stars? But now he seemed different. From high above, looking over him and her subjects, he felt strangely powerful, yet even despite his appearance. That is what made Seben so scared and daring to run outside to fight him. But when she got there on his level, she found him strangely lying on the ground, clutching his knee. He was covered in bruises and blood, when just moments ago he had been standing just fine, giving orders to the highest authority of Uraeus. Now he seemed every bit the ill, weak man his appearance made him out to be, but he seemed to spot the hiding princess and usher her out to help his wounded self. For several seconds, the kind-hearted Princess Seben struggled with her morality. Was she just to let him suffer and bleed to death? But then again, he did just appear out of nowhere and seemingly send a whole mob of people into a strange, thick, dreamlike sleep. Finally, she broke and ran to help the man. She came to kneel beside him to inspect his wounds, but then he just seemed to smile and giggle like a child playing a prank. He revealed himself to be a professor, which didn't seem to have the same grand academic meaning to her as it did to him. His name was Orson Ward, apparently. This man who seemed so intimidating and dangerous to Seben from afar now seemed like a strange new friend she had just made, and seemed eager to answer the many questions she had about his baffling arrival on Uraeus. She was flattered that despite her not quite feminine frame, this stranger, a man who never even knew of her previous years as a prince, so quickly was able to respect the hidden beauty of the woman she was rather than the male shell she was born into, and treated her justly. He explained he came from a land beyond the curtain of the stars, gesturing to the pitch of night as he said so. He came from a land where time itself did not exist, and he explained he was still getting to grips with the natural flow of time in this universe. The princess marveled at this concept in particular. Perhaps he was some sort of unlikely defender the gods had sent to safeguard the land, a being from another world to bless Kemetsheps with technology. Ward caught that twinkle in her eye and gently motioned with his head to the door of the box. He wanted her to open it, and when she did, she fell back to the floor in sheer amazement. Within the cabinet, as he called it, she could see a strange type of control console, with numerous bizarre lights and magical implements around it, surrounded by a humongous library filled with furniture and bookshelves that stretched out to the darkness of shadows. He put his hand on her shoulder and looked in her eyes, asking what her name was. As they bonded under the stars that night, Ward revealed he had crashed the cabinet because he had been trying to locate some sort of energy ring above the clouds of Evodia's crown when his systems malfunctioned. This was it. It had to have been destiny. Seben decided to tell him about the oncoming war. If he ever found those rings, he would surely be able to defend Uraeus. Ward gazed at her eyes with excitement in their meeting, and related a war between his own kind, which is the whole reason he left, in order to find a weapon that might protect his peaceful family. He explained his family was baffled by his actions, for their race uses omnipotence for nothing other than pompous ignorance, as he called it. As he pranced around the sky, seeming so innocent, the professor's eyes flashed with a mad idea. What if the princess would join him? Once again, Seben's instincts told her caution, but as he held out his hand to her in camaraderie, she saw a kindred spirit. A man whose people hated his desires and lifestyle, and a man she and the prince she had once been could connect with. The kingdom once so attached to the Sultan's boy now seemed so distant and cold, just like the sleepful days the guards had been in when she walked past. It was like they saw echoes of the man she'd once been, but never the full picture of the woman she knew she was. It was then that Professor Ward held out his hand to offer Seben a gift. As she beheld a bracelet that curled and winded like the gripping body of a snake, she stared into the emerald jewel on it, and became so mesmerized with the force and energy within it, she didn't even realize that she had begun trying to wear it. But the kind stranger's eyes then snapped into anger and tried to reclaim it from her hands. As her trance broke, she turned to him, and his expression immediately relaxed to become the kind man she'd come to know. He simply explained that the bracelet was a gift of unimaginable power for the leader of the nation alone. One day the charm would have the power to grant them the powers of the snake, change the course of their evolution, and that day he would return to see the majestic kingdom they might become. He explained he was most impressed with snakes of this world, and believed that they would outlast any predator and any conflict, as well as held untapped mystical potential. The people would adapt to these traits, at least until they were able to find those sacred rings. Then they would be able to change reality and stop the war from even happening. A solution that might seem strange, nonetheless necessary. With the knowledge she would once again return to Uraeus, and all the wondrous powers she'd learned from him, she took his hands and beheld the elegance inside his disproportionately large cabinet. One day she would return to Kemetsheps and find acceptance and peace, but for now she was happy to leave the parting bracelet and join this stranger on their quest for a greater power. She believed she would return a hero, for within the night of her fear, she now felt the stars offered her comfort. To travel with a man who finally saw the true her, the cabinet ship began to rise up into the moonlight, and she felt a great swell of hope for her people, with the trinket the stranger had given her. Whatever happened now would mean the kingdom would grow to be more ready for the grisly war in the dawn, no matter what that entailed.